Hey, thanks for tuning in for the Sunday Simply Test Me stream. Today I'm going to be working on some more React code refactoring. Last week I was going through and cleaning up some of the React code that we had since it was written when we first started doing the port to Drupal 9, and the code kind of became a big spaghetti monster mess. And I started moving things out into their own components. I can get to the right tab even. So we have a quick, I'm going to open the merge request so we can even see the changes. We did notice that there were some weird bugs happening when switching between a contrib project and between Drupal core. But we kind of went down the rabbit hole trying to fix that when I think we need to go through fixing more items first. So the merge request is open. Just want a quick review and also re-upload in my brain because I've not been able to work on this all week. And prep to make sure that I don't have to work tomorrow, which is a holiday here in the United States. So yeah, so in the app.js, we had these installation options, which had its own like subcomponents that were inside the component itself, which meant that every time that component was rendered, those functions were reestablished. Where now they're set aside in the same file, and the state was moved into there. So now that installation options is actually stateless. So there was like some rendering improvements there. So we got some stuff spun out, and inside our launcher, I just documented a few things to try to work around some bugs. So let's get this kicked off. But first, before I forget, I want to give a shout out to all the sponsors that help make Simply Test Me possible. Tugboat.qa, they provide all the sandbox environments. So when you actually try out Simply Test.me to create an environment, as actually brought to you by Tugboat. Amaze.io for the cloud hosting with their Lagoon platform, which is an open source, say like orchestration platform on top of the orchestration platform Kubernetes. It's like a wrapper around it. Then we have QED42 has been providing developer time for theming. Then Blue Horde Digital, disclaimer, my own company. I have been using some of my time, but also using some of the open collective money to do this work. The live streams I just do as a way to like keep people updated and just keep pushing it forward. And thanks to our sponsors, Centauro, previously the Drupal Association for monthly contributions, and in kind to Maloon and Druid, who have been from the beginning providing infrastructure support for Simply Test Me. Before Amazing Lagoon or Amazy and Tugboat, things were running on VMs that they provided and allocated resources for. And thanks to anybody else who is an individual or organizational sponsor on Open Collective. If you want to join in, we have different contribution levels, and that helps just fund development instead of, just when somebody can find time to set aside to work on it. This ensures that there's active maintenance. All right, so let's move on to the next bit of refactoring. And the way I was going through it before, JSON error edit, no. Error and prettier.json. That would do it. So what I was doing last time is I was just kind of going down this list and saying like, all right, what components are in here that need to get split out? So like additional projects, advanced options, and the launcher and the launcher mount. So next part will be this additional projects. Part of the refactor, I just want to get all these things into their own components and kind of analyze them as we go. So instead of being fancy with my file naming, I've just been doing a file inside components that matches the component name. And let's see, we've got use state, use launcher. I'll just copy that line there so that way we can get our imports. And we will copy this out. So I'll do a cut and a paste, and then I'm going to do export default additional projects. And to prevent it from erroring, so down here, we have an error because additional projects doesn't exist anymore. So we're going to do a import of that. Again, if you don't know the shortcuts, because I haven't installed something like show my key presses. When you hover over items in PHP Storm or any of the IntelliJ products, and I think VS Code has something like this too, there's a little light bulb that shows actions. You can access it via Option Enter as well. And I'm going to do insert import additional projects. And now we have that there. So let's figure out what we can do to clean all this up. We don't have use effect. It is using something from the patches. Okay, so here we go. I remember in this, the patches component could have used some refactoring. So I'm going to also just fix a few things with prettier as we go. Again, I'm using that Option Enter to just quick fix all the prettier items. All right, so we have in here add additional project, and it would be helpful if I got the site up so you could see what that links to. But while my local environment gets up, I'll shoot it over to here. So the additional projects, if we go into here and we pick password policy, we're going to get this additional projects tab. And this is what we're refactoring right here. Is this additional projects lends into here. So we can do, so let's say we've got password policy, and we're going to do password policy pwned, because I know that is a project that is in part of like the ecosystem. This is a UX thing we need to work on, but password policy pwned is only supported by Drupal 8 and higher. So if we change this to 8.3, we now get Drupal 9, and we get the accessible password pwned policies. And when you add an additional project, you can also add patches to it. And you can see here this add additional project. This is the function being called, which I want to, and it's calling the something from the context. And this context is like our global state management for the form. And this is where it tracks all the additional projects. So it's calling into the parent to just add an empty project data array. So this is what we're going to be working on in refactoring. So this additional button, set additional button. This, I don't honestly remember what this is for. This got added in, then I can't annotate with git blame. It got added in in some earlier patch. I know I didn't add it, but it was added in to create this additional button, which goes to the project autocomplete. Additional button is used. So if true, to change the label, because we are reusing the same component here and here. So it got added to adjust the label to say if it should be evaluate Drupal projects, which really we should change this label to be, you know, like Selector project, and evaluate Drupal project should be a header. Good morning, Adam. So that's one thing there. That's something I would actually like to get refactored out, because I feel like additional button doesn't really make sense. And yeah, so, and why was it's set in here? So hold on, I'm gonna real quick go and let's see. I'm gonna do a command click. So in PHP Storm, and I'm pretty sure VS Code is the same way. When you do command or control, so FYI, I am Mac. I haven't had a Windows computer in I don't know how long, since high school. So maybe like 13 years ago. I don't know. I'm 33 now, so 15 years ago. And I had a Linux machine last like 8 years ago, which had the same keyboard layout. So I don't know. But command and control. So we have this state, which defaults to false. And additional button when I command click on it, it shows me the usages. It's only used here. So I don't know why we have it as a state when add additional project is added. So I'm going to click do a refresh here. Password policy. So add additional projects include. So once we click this button, I don't know if we have a development build available. We don't. But we can still inspect the state. Now that I have my local up, I could just do it there. But let's quick look at some of the statefulness. So state false. Oh, it's not going to let us modify it in the production build. So let's go ahead and do the simply test ddev site. Because it seems to me that we don't need this state. We just need to pass true here all the time. And this might be like a minor performance improvement, but it does help clean up the code quite a bit. So let's do password policy. And let's see here. So we've got additional projects, state false. So yeah, if I toggle it on and off, doesn't do anything. If I click add, it's now true. So I think the first step we can do is just change this to be true. And that means we can delete this hook, which could help prevent unnecessary re-render. Well, it won't change the required amount of re-renders because the additional projects will change and cause the entire component to re-render. And so why I say that is we're reading from this hook of additional projects, and we map on all those projects to here. I know we have a bug here where it says do not use array keys. So in React, whenever you have a loop or dynamic elements, they always want a key attached to it. And that key helps sort out from my knowledge, like when they do a diff of the render tree, it helps identify what was exactly removed instead of doing a deeper analysis, which means it can be more performant. That is my understanding of it. And additional projects has no easy way to tie off to it. Well, we have a short name. So let me quick do a rebuild or do a develop build of it. All right, that didn't want to run. So let's just do, where am I? I'm in the theme, npm run develop. All right, we'll let that build. And we're going to start to experiment with it. Let's do a fix. Ooh, you had some of that Starbucks Reserve coffee. Nice. So for those who don't know, I'm in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which is just north of Chicago. And 2 years ago, like right before COVID hit, they opened the Starbucks Reserve. Apparently it's like the biggest one. It's 5 stories, 5 stories. It's super cool. I'm honestly not like a big Starbucks fan. Like I was adamantly against Starbucks for a long time. My wife likes Starbucks. Now I'm into it, but the Starbucks Reserve is just an entire different experience. Like if you're into third wave coffee, like that is the Starbucks Reserve experience. I got to go to the one that's in Seattle when we had DrupalCon Seattle, and I was like, this is amazing. And then they built the one in Chicago. So our first trip since COVID hit, we went to Chicago. After my wife and I got vaccinated, we got her a new wedding ring because this is our 11th year being married. So I got a new ring, and we decided to stop off at Starbucks Reserve, and I picked up some coffee and sent some to Adam. Got a question about what do I think about pen testing, like penetration testing? Like I do it every here and there. Like it's not something that I work with often. I'll just clean up the whole file. So I believe I'm torn because we had an e-commerce site, and they were hosted on, and this is no shame to platform.sh. It's just this is like what happened. So they had a site on platform.sh, and there's some obscure SSH bug that is used in government level hacks. Something like that. I can't even remember what it's called, and maybe it's fixed by now. I don't even know. This is about 4 years ago. And they were like throwing these red flags, and it's like, seriously? Like, there has to be context. So I guess it really depends on what you mean by pen testing. But somebody's like, oh, I just downloaded this tool and hammered the site, and I've got all these new reports. It's like, but I don't, like, I don't know. I've never had good experience when people do like a penetration test because they just pick some random rules and then there's no context behind it. So if you're going to do penetration testing, like, know why you are and what you're even aiming to do. Like Drupal. So here's one thing, like maybe you know, by default, Drupal does not consider username enumeration or user ID enumeration to be a security issue. This means like if you went to /user/12345 and you got a 404 or a 403, if it's 404, that user ID doesn't exist. If you get a 403, bingo bango, you found a user ID. Things like that aren't considered a security issue, or being able to enumerate usernames via a forgot password. I think there is actually a core patch though that's being done to harden that. So I was also on a project where like, you've got username enumeration. This thing's insecure. I'm like, is it really? Or like, do we need to make sure we have a password policy in place? Like, it depends. It also depends on like what you're really protecting. Like, yes, it's in good usage, but it's also something I feel like people waste a lot of money on. No shadow. So it's, yeah, it's a mixed bag. I've never had a good experience, but I think I've also never been on a properly planned instance. And one good thing about using a platform like Drupal is you do have organizations who are constantly doing that and is constantly receiving security fixes. So you only need to be concerned about your code in where you expose custom endpoints. So the threat vector is very, 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 very small. Not to say that there isn't some lingering, security bug that could be found, but if your organization is just like picking a pen testing tool off the shelf, it may not find those bugs. All right, so I'm going to go back to refactoring some of this. So I hope that helped answer some of your questions. It's definitely one that I've always focused more on performance engineering and diving into the nitty gritty of performance than necessarily the security part of it. And that's specifically because Drupal is honestly really secure. It has really good code. So I haven't really found anything that's wild. I also am not that smart. Like some of the people who do find those bugs, they are just extremely well at tinkering, and I don't know how they do it. All right. So we're going to go back into here. So I want to get this key to be something solid. So if I go to additional projects, right, we're in additional projects. And let me add one here. All right, it's in the... So we're right now using this key. So let's pick short... Oh, the short name's not even set? Is that because no... So I think this ties into some of the bugs I was finding last week, where certain data is not being set when I would expect. And right here, without a version, it doesn't actually commit the additional project, which I guess makes sense because the additional project can't exist without a version. But we do have the short name here. So we could we can make the key be project.shortname. And we'll keep the ID. Maybe we should do that for the ID too. This might break a test. Let me review my Cypress tests. Integration, launch form spec, additional projects. So yeah, we have additional project 0. And that, we'll keep it on the array key because the key might As we saw before, the value might be nothing. This way we ensure we at least get some kind of let's see. Let's change it. We'll make it the project short name. And I want to fix this. So project is part of the upper scope, and now it's doing a shallow. What is it called? So it's shadowing it. Let's do, let's call it new project and new. No. We'll say selected project, selected version. So if it's not already in, and I put some notes in here that onChange is technically called with each render. There's some weird rendering going in, and this is part of what I want to fix up. Is this also shadowed? Jeez. onChange, we get here, project selection. onChange, it calls project and version. We'll just say I don't have good words for it. So we're going to say onChange to prevent any shadowing. So additional onChange project short name, on version. Some things with prettier don't necessarily make it prettier, to be honest. So we have version and we have that. So let's go ahead and this test should be password policy. Let me read. So password policy, actually, since the short name, that should end up being the ID because we're picking the short name and it wasn't committed yet since it has no versions. Right, down enter, get by label, project version. And then this should be password policy pwned. And let me open up Cypress so we can test this. It's like it doesn't know the right path. So if I open package.json, nope, wrong one. There. You've got to be kidding me. 1 second. I busted node on my environment. No, it's right here. Let me just go in profiles contrib, simply test, npm run, Cypress open, and we'll get Cypress running. And also run develop once more to make sure we have the up-to-date code. I should be watching or doing a watch, but I'll just do another build. What's this error? Toolbox. I don't want to disable it. I'm just going to ignore it for now. All right, let that build. An update is available. We'll blah, blah, blah. All right. So that's running real quick. I'm going to manually test it just to make sure. We got password policy, add additional project. Password policy pwned. We don't get anything because it's not a valid version. Because password policy pwned requires Drupal 8. So we need at least a minimum of Drupal 8 supported. And then we get our value here. project selection. Warning, maximum update depth selected. Oh. So that's, yeah. I'm sure we have called set state within use effect, but use effect doesn't have a dependency array, or one of the dependencies changes on every render. All right, well, that's going to be fun to debug. But here we're looking at the ID, which is, where do I set the ID? Additional project is still, so I guess we can't use the short name because it gets added and rendered. Oh shoot, because it's probably doing like a shallow diff. Like data changed inside of the array's objects, but the array didn't change itself. Like we didn't add something to the array, so we cannot use. We need to keep this at K, but we can change the key name. Well, this might just be a bug on when the version is set. So I'm going to rerun develop and just run the test. That means I also need to fix the test again. To be just 0. Yeah, so that's going to be the problem with this app is there's the higher end context, and we have 2 of the same like autocompletes being embedded, and just there's some things that have too many dependencies. Things just kind of got really spaghettied up. Like it's still, oh, it's still running. Oh geez, it is just like constantly re-rendering. So let's close that. That's one heck of a bug. So let's go look into, let's see if I can profile that. So I'm going to do the profiler. Let's do password policy, add additional project. And this is how we can replicate it, by changing the values. Let's change it here as well. All right, so now maximum update length exceeded. Let's stop the render. So here it's going. I don't know if this is really going to help me figure out what I'm looking at. So launch provider, it re-rendered the one-click demos, which that's weird. Why would it do that later on? Let's go see one-click demos. Demos, processing. It's got state, so it's not even. Why would this re-render when it has nothing from the parent state? So the launch provider, launcher, project selection, advanced options, one-click demos. Why would this? Let's see here. So did it cause the, let's go to launcher. So launcher errors, set error. It has all these components, which then fires off the launch, like calls it to build it. So disabled, can launch. If I click here, just tells us the time. So launch provider just keeps re-rendering. And maybe that's what's causing all the problems here. So if I go, so at project selection, and that's not going to, so it's still going. So project selection maximum rendered by launcher. All right. Shoot. So the launcher, we get project selection, set main project, selected version. We have can launch, set main project selected project version. Is it because can launch is changing? But set main project is a function that we pass up. I wonder if it's this initial default project that we had to add for adding with the query parameters. So selected project, selected version. Real quick, what I'll do is, so we have this initial, so it's saying use state. So that's used to like populate the default state is the idea behind it. Use effect. Oh, well, if it's changing, let's delete that here. So basically what we want to say is on the first render, only listen to those values. I think I created basically like a redirect, like an infinite render loop. So maybe sharing this component is going to cause more problems than it's worth. Or at least this initial state idea. Because this doesn't make sense when working with additional projects. So let's see if this fixes it. To which I'm going to change this from run to watch so we can just have faster incremental builds. And I didn't notice that before. So this is the hard part. Like I want to try to stay somewhat on task with splitting this out, but if we find other bugs, it's like hard to just keep refactoring. But I think maybe that should be the next step. Like this was cleaned up. We know we have a bug here, so the easiest way to start fixing all these bugs is by splitting more things out, like this advanced options. So can launch patches. So all right, let's do that. So let's move advanced options into its own. Let's do advanced options.js. Import React from React. Export default advanced options, which then we need to import it so everything's happy, which now that means we can clear out a bunch of imports from here. All right, so if we cannot launch, we return null. Open this up here and open that. All right, so we have no errors. So let's see, advanced options. Let's just fix the file. So it only renders if we can launch, which can launch is set based on, when do we set can launch? So if we have a selected version and a selected project set, we set it to can launch. Which I feel like we should just move that into set main project. So maybe that'll be one thing, because before they were like really separated. Like we would commit parts of the state on their own. So I wonder if we need a part of it is we have too many things that are changing and it's causing too many renders. But let's just see if I can get the cycle of doom to occur. 2. Oh, why did it? All right. So we do that. We change this to the 2. So it's still, all right. Maximum update depth at project selection. Line 1, 23, 1123, which is on change. So I wonder if that's why. All right, so let's look. Let's refresh that page. All right, so I think I understand it now. So let's look at the project selection. We have on change here. And on change is a dependency in use effect. And when we call on change, project selection, when we go to the launcher, on change is set main project. So we're passing a function. And I think that's the problem. React hooks function dependency. I think we need to use the use memo or use callback. I'm going to use functions in a hooks dependency array whenever the linter tells you to. So I've had this happen and save the local storage. All right, so we're getting a parent method. Ultimately, React needs to rerun effects if those changes. So my concern is that if the function ever changes, we need to run it again. We need to be like, if the component is reused, it needs to know that it's a different, like has different data. It's still referenced in import. Again, debate certainty. Before we knew, it didn't close over any state. What if the parent was refactored? What if we wanted to retain application details? Use callback. Here we go. Because so what they're saying is instead of passing the raw function down, pass it as an anonymous function, and then it should prevent errors from happening. But that could be hacky. So if the parent component is re-renders for any reason, then the arrow function will be recreated, which means that it's going to be, this is like what we're having happen, is the context is being modified, it's causing it to re-render, which is regenerating the functions, which is passing it as props, which is causing something else to render, and it's going down the rabbit hole. So to keep the function's identity in sync, we would implement use callback. All right, use callback hook creates a memoized version of a function for this very purpose. All right, so let's try that here. So in app, we have set main project. Use callback hooks. Log data. All right, so let's try using this to see if we can try using use callback to see if we can fix that horrible like nested render that's going on here. But what makes me wonder is we have function set main project being defined here. which means that every time the launch provider is rendered, it goes. I feel like we need some extra work to be done here because we have this function of set main project. And anytime the launch provider is re-rendered, due to the state, this function is being recreated. But we can't take this function outside the scope because we depend on these two methods. So let's see. React use memo should be a hook. Let's go to use hooks as well. Understanding memoization, creating a use memo. So extract use memo function run on the first render. It would block the thread until expensive function is complete. Initially, this will not look as clean as long as list. Okay, so we don't want to use memo because we do want to use a callback because we don't necessarily want the value to be memoized and used once. Yeah, so use callback returns a memoized function, which means the function isn't recreated, whereas use memo returns the value of the function over and over and over again. You won't want to use memo to fire side effects. Use effect. All right, so let's look at how we can get use callback in here. Oh, actually, okay. So let's do that. This should actually be set main project should actually be passed as a use callback. So let's import use callback. So we'll have change this to constant set main project equals use callback. And if I wrap that in parentheses, I think, oh, I need an equal sign. That would help. All right. So what's the error here? Number of arguments invalid expected 2. Oh, because it needs dependencies. So use callback returns the memoized version of the callback that only changes if one of the inputs is changed. Which I feel like this is the same problem because if the project or version changes, this will change as well. So we're going to try this. We're going to just experiment. Let's just experiment and see what happens. Can I just fix the entire file? It's prettier. Project is not defined. Oh. So I guess when do we want this to re-render? We never want to re-render. Unless we wanted it to re-render on these functions, but I want to try not doing that. So let's just see what happens. Let's see if anything breaks. Ugh. All right, let's see if this works. So now set main project has been put to a callback, which means that it won't be re-rendered because it'll be memoized, which allows us to have it inside of our component that does re-render. So let's see what happens here. We've been recompiled. Browser sync is refreshing the browser for us, but I'm just going to refresh it anyways because it seems to be hanging. All right, so let's do password policy. For some reason, it didn't pass a version because a version came in late. And if we change it here, we get the updated compatible core versions. So let's do add additional project. We're going to do password policy pwned. We need to change this to be 8.1.beta. And here we go. It's still happening. It's got to be something on when we change this here. I wish it could tell us. Oh, okay. It's at a different spot now. So we fixed it here using the memorize callback. Code still works. But if we look at it here, it's now no longer at launcher project selection. It's inside additional projects at project selection. So let's see where we're getting a forced re-render to happen there. So again, project selection is here, and it receives this on change callback along with this extra stuff. So that was in additional projects is when we get patches and where is it? Project selection. So here we go. We have on change, which is passing an anonymous function, which tells me that we should move it up here. So let's import from React. Let's do use callback again. Let's call it const on change equals use callback. And we need, I don't know what we want the dependencies to be. So let's just copy this anonymous function. Call it on change. Let's paste it here. Oop, not paste it right there. Let's paste it here. So on change. Oh, but it was like inside of itself. Oh, man. So this won't quite work. So I wonder if we could be really, hold on, let's try something really kooky. Instead of like splitting that out, let's actually just wrap use callback inside of here. Like I'm just gonna try wrapping. I'm gonna just try wrapping this in it. Use callback expects this, and let's just say that this dependency is the project is on the project short name. So if the project short name changes, we want this function to re-render. I don't know. Let's do that and then ignore prettier for a second. So it re-rendered. This is the hard part. We have so much data that depends on each other because we're essentially rebuilding the version constraints that Composer, any package manager uses when adding sub projects. So this is an interesting, I've never actually had a use case for use callback. Like I know why it needed to exist, and that's to prevent a function from being recreated, which then has a different signature, which causes re-renders down the stack. But I never had a setup which was causing that. No, why is this being, there we go. So now we've got something else that happens where it's fetching core compatibility before the version is even set. So like there's something else that's happening. So add additional project. And it only happens when we select a version here and causes everything to change here. All right, React hooked. All right. So we don't have a bunch of issues happening. React hook has detected change in the order of hooks called by additional projects. This will lead to bugs and errors if not fixed. That's because we defined it in an array and it probably needs to be done further up the stack. Okay. So we gotta find, I need to find a way to pull this out. So let's again yank this out. I know I'm gonna call it on change. let's do const on change equals use callback. The problem is it was comparing if it was trying to compare if the value changed or not, which I feel like if I put an anonymous function in here, it's going to still cause a re-render. So it's basically trying to check if the name doesn't match, but maybe state management needs refactor on changes technically called with each render, and the component has no idea if it has really changed or not and ends up being called in each render. Maybe this is no longer true. New projects, K equals this. So I'm trying to just think on what I could do, because any anonymous function passed on change is going to cause this to re-render. But what if we I undo some of this part and I remove that dependency? Because that honestly would fix it there. That dependency is causing the use effect to always re-render. Or maybe it's just it being passed in here is always causing it to re-render anyways. Let's just see. There's got to be a way to handle this. And that part too. One second. I want to figure out Drupal core version selector, use effect selected version, if selected version dot length equal to 0, return. I don't like, let's do I don't know if I like nesting it more, but fix the current file. All right, I don't know if I necessarily like nesting it more, but that's going to fix that bug because it was running to fetch the related compatible versions before we had the version committed to state. Which that's a whole different thing I want to fix, where we shouldn't have the project name and version as two state items. It should be in one. And that's the end goal here. Great, so we no longer have that error. It filed at the appropriate time. But now the advanced options won't render until we change that value. So let's go to launcher, can launch. What did I change here? So set can launch. On the selected project, selected version. I feel like this stopped working once we did set main callback. So what I want to try to do is let's just move this out of its own side effect and into set main project. And the idea here is that instead of having all of these separate hooks, like maybe we need to have start using a reducer, but I want project and version to match the data we have in launched instance, which is project. Sorry, so here. So the project has its title, short name, type, sandbox, and version. So I want to move version into that value on its own. Kind of like we have for additional projects. So all this refactor is trying to lead into there, and also to fix any render bugs that we're experiencing. So let's do password policy. So we got the versions, and it set the version. Let's go to context provider, value. Selected version is empty, even though we have a version in here. 1 second. Let me see if I can fix that. Because we have version selector. Here we go. So version selector, we're setting the version. Oh, that's why. So we set the versions list, which gives the which gives it a value. Oh, let's clean all this up. It's not even going to give me an option to fix the entire file. All right. So what's happening is we're setting the selected project dot short name. Oh, so we're setting the versions, which populates the select list, but doesn't actually. We should pick the first version. So let's look at reset. So password policy, if we looked at the version selector, states, so in the state, that is this versions. So we're just going to pick the first one. So let's do set versions. What happens when we pick one? Oh, set selected version. Here we go. So it's supposed to pick one here. So if there's no initial version, I don't know. Like there's stuff here that's all weird. Like why? So 1 second. So let's see here. That's not running because we're passing an initial version. Oh man, and it is set. But why isn't it adding the, so we added the support for launching a project via query parameters, and I think that has completely hosed a lot of this. So we have a selected version, we have an initial version, but that's not respected here in selected version. We have selected project. So let's see. So set selected version. It's supposed to be inside of the version selector, and it gets passed to it by project autocomplete. No, project selector. So initial version, selected version is here. We set the version to the initial version, which inside launcher, nope, inside app and the launcher, this code is initial version is the selected version. All right. I don't know why this isn't working. So we have an initial version set, which means it doesn't end up calling this. So I'm going to just put it in here too. This is just not working. That didn't do it either. What is happening here? So wait. Oh, because we have two different areas. We have this one is if it's a sub project. So this is for additional projects, and then this is for the main project. That still did not set it. What I'm going to try to do is drop a debugger here. Or actually, I want to put it up here. So if selected project is equal to null, return null. We return the version here on change set selected version, which bubbles it up. And then we react on selected project and applied core constraint, and on selected project applied the side effect on the versions and initial version. So there's some weird stuff happening with the state that's not causing the selected version to be populated in the global state. So here, closure, initial version is empty and versions is empty. So that means we should skip over. So let's play. By password policy, we have, oh, I already see the bug. So we received all the versions, which means our fetch ran, and there's no initial version. The initial version is empty. If we step over, we're going to call set selected version. If we step into it and we hit play, it's going to come back because the initial version has changed. All right, so I think I found the bug here, and it's with the query parameters. Because now it'll skip over, and this is where things get wonky. So in our launcher, what we have here is, here's all the query parameters. So it sets the version. So set selected project by the short name or by the version and the project. And that's setting those values. And if we look, we've got all the initial work here. So if we go to project selection, we have this initial default version, initial default project. And that's getting cached into the project and version here. And we're setting it to be the default on mount, which this was like working on a bug. But the problem is then we get to the version selector and we have the, wait, where is it set? Set selected version, initial version. So we have this initial version, which is the version and selected version. Let's change this. I'm not sure why I had it this way. Let's see if that fixes it. So whenever the version's changing, it's causing everything to re-render. And that's changed initial default project to here. But the problem is those are all changing. And there's no way to say like, oh, you launched the form with this initial data and now we can go, like fork and forget it. So I think all the query parameters pre-filling needs to be blown away. Let's cut this out as well and refresh. So we've got our debugger. Let's go to password policy. So initial version is empty and we have versions. Initial version is still being set and we have versions. If I look at our app state, the selected project is null. And if I select this, I didn't want to hit pause, hit play. So it doesn't get, the select list has to change for the state to commit, which is opposite as to what we had happening before. And now the advanced options aren't even rendering. I feel like this entire thing just needs to be gutted and rebuilt. because there's just too much happening at once. Or this project autocomplete and version selector should maybe they're not standalone. They're only used. So find usage. It's only used in the project selector. So maybe it could be streamlined if we put it inside of the project selection itself. But yeah, the problem is that this initial project value is shooting us in the foot. Initial default project. Maybe there's a way we can fix this. Hold on. I won't want to give up on it yet. So I don't want it to equal this project, because that's what we have initial default project set for. And the selected project should be, oh, that's why, because selected project is there. So sure, let's just keep that as is. I don't want to add more state to this, but I want to find a way to have this initial default should not be the selected project and selected version. So what if we do this initial default project? I don't really like this, but I don't know what to do. So we can't call set main project because that will give us all the problems. No, there's just no good way to handle this. I don't know. I really don't know the best way to handle this idea of like there's the default. Without every single thing saying like, oh yeah, we got a default, we can run with it. Shoot. So if we go in, so yes, now it runs. We have the initial version is empty. We have the versions. So it's going to call the set selected version, which is going to cause a re-render because technically initial version is now that value. Which means everything is broken. Oh. All right. I need to think on how we can do this. So when I go back and add these, so we'll do, so set default, I'll call that initial default. And in here, instead of doing set project, because what is set main project? Set main project, there's a handful of things here. What I realized is this set can launch are removed. Let's copy that and bring it back out. So we'll bring that back out. set selected version. We'll do initial default project, initial default version, and we're going to say that it can launch if we have either of those both set. So we're able to launch if we land on the page and we have a default, we have a selected project and selected version, or the initial of each. Block scoped variables cannot be redeclared. What? Oh, shoot. There we go. All right, so we have those two called there. And inside of not set main project, we'll have to do this here with the search params. So if project and has versions, we need to do set default project is this stub, and set initial default version is here. And we also need the workaround that says, what do we have here? So if project short name is Drupal, I'm going to comment out, I'm going to delete that line as well. That can launch. Also, I guess this, okay, that does have all the, okay, that does have everything in it. Set initial value. Let's do this. So if the project short name is Drupal core, if the short name is equal to Drupal, we want to set Drupal version to be search params dot get version. So the idea here is that we have two different, we're splitting out the main project and the initial default, so that way it is kind of a fork and forget type of approach. So the initial default value is never modified except for when you load the page. And I'm really hoping this solves a lot of it. So if they provide a project and version, we want set something. If it provides just a project, if it has patches, we're going to set the patches, and we'll deal with that later. All right, so now what we need to do is we're going to expose this down here. So if you haven't worked with React context providers, anything that's in this value is what can be fetched using the hook of this use launcher. So now, as we have that, we can get the initial default project version from those values and the project, which means we can pass initial default project and initial default version. I'm like face palming here because we're now adding like more and more items to the props, which means there's more chances for something to re-render. Let's see. That's going to hit stop. I'm going to reload the page so everything's compiled, and we'll see what happens. All right, so initial version is empty. There's no versions. It's expected. Now if I type in password policy, we've got initial version is empty because we didn't start with one. We have the versions. If I hit play, initial version is still what got set, and we have the error where it didn't work. So let's trail on back. So project selection, project version. Let's change this to null, null. Remove that here. Let's just fix the current file. So selected, so applied core constraint. So in here, we have initial project. Well, initial project should actually be initial default project. Initial version should be initial default version. Where do we have set version? Set selected version. Why don't we have an additional? Oh, because I did something wrong. Hold on. Set project. Initial project is initial project here. And then initial version is initial default version there. All right. And on change, we call on change with the project and version. Whenever the project and version changes, because when project complete calls set project. Wait, where is? All right, yeah, so they bubble up and they call this on change to set it, which then gets pushed up to the full context. So let's just see. I'm gonna hit stop and reload. And see if splitting this out fixes this mess. Come on. Reload. Let's ignore the first pass. Password policy. Initial version is empty. We get the versions, which means it's call set selected version. All right. So value on prop should not consider using an empty string. All right, so let's do, oh, we don't want it to be the value of null. So it ran and it's set, and we didn't seem to have like the error where selected version was, well, why isn't this empty? Oh, I hate this. This is supposed to be if selected project is equal to null. Because version selector selected project is an because I made it an empty string. All right. That's the one problem with using like code that hasn't been printified yet, and then you're on printer, your diff is now gone. That's a mistake on my part. So we now have no initial version. We have, this is where the bug hits. We call selected version. That's great, but for some reason, advanced options didn't show up. And if we look at the value, the selected version is still empty, even though it was called or should have been called. Because it should have been called here and there. Let's drop a debugger here, unless I'm going to remove it from there and here. And get this to rebuild and run through it. So initial version, yeah, first run. So for policy, we have versions. We have a, so there's no initial version. We have versions. So if I step over, we set the selected version. If I step over, hit play, but it didn't set it in the global context. So project selection should have called it here. So let's look at project selection state. We have one state that says it's the project version. That's this first one. The next state says that the version is here. So it should have called as on change. So I'm going to put a debugger here now. And we'll see if that's where the bug lies, is actually inside of, I'm going to kill that because we know that's not debugging. We know the bug's not inside of version selector. It's in project selection, which is inside of, where does on change get set? Inside of launcher? No. App. Set main project, which we made set main project a memoized function. And after we did that, things started to get weird. So let's see. So we have a project and a version. On change, so we have set main project. So we have a version, we have the project, we set the selected project, we set the selected version, but why doesn't use effect? Oh, shoot. You know what? I bet this is part of it. So the idea was that we needed to clear out values if the selected project changed. And this is why. So let's do, I'm going to try something here. Where do we set can launch? Let's do debugger here. And let's re-roll. Now, I don't know if in use effect you get the previous state. And that's what we need to have happen. So that's why I put args undefined. Closure. So the selected project. So unuse effect selected project is null. Selected version. It clears out the values. Can launch is false. Son of a gun. Password policy. So here we go. We get our on change fired as expected. Selected project changes. Selected version is set. In Drupal version's empty, but boom, that clears out the value and we can no longer launch. So if I were to remove that and change that there, let it rerun. Let's do React, use effect, check previous value. And now if I do this, we get the project and version, and we get the advanced options. Okay, so that was one bug. Geez. How to get prop state with React hooks. Solution discussed. If you look in there, you'll find an example of counter. You have to use a reference. I don't want to use a reference. Use previous count. So man, very people use reference. Use ref hook is a perfect substitute for implementing instance-like variables within functional components. So I guess that's one where we need to have a ref that's like a snapshot to compare the difference. Oh wait, no we don't. No we don't. No we don't. Hold on. Because we split. So to back up to all of this, why this exists is for that whole initial default project stuff. So if the project version changed, well, actually it needs to be that whenever the selected project changes. But this kind of works on its own. So I don't remember why I added this. Something was causing it that this needed to be cleared out. Um, so I guess maybe I should use a reference. So previous ref, use effect, that current is count, previous count, current before. That seems like so much extra work just to be able to check the previous value inside of this reference. I'm just going to delete this and go to get dot simply test, and I'm just going to quick do a check to see why I added this. So it's in the launcher, lib context launcher, and do a blame, and blame for set Drupal version. Oh, did I add it? Where? It's not even in here. Why did I have this? All right, so apparently I shot myself in the foot. I'm gonna look at this merge request to see if I added it in here for some reason, but I didn't. Launcher. Oh my god, I did. Why? Why did I do this to myself? So there you go. You know, it's really easy to shoot yourself in the foot without realizing that you shot yourself in the foot. Um, so what happened? I don't know why I added that effect. I think it's because I was trying to handle this weird bug between when you pick a contrib version and a go from contrib to core to contrib. The versions get all messed up. But instead, I destroyed my values. So let's go password policy. All right. Oh, jeez. So let's delete the debuggers because I made this way more harder on myself. Delete this, use callback because we avoided that. All right, so back on track because I went down a major rabbit hole there. I need to even summarize for myself. So advanced options and additional projects was spun out. Oh, let's just fix this whole file with why is there a fix the current file? All right, so advanced options and additional projects got spun out of the main app.js. So we have even more cleanup. We spun out this weird, not bug, but we have the ability to do a, so if we go project equals password policy, it knows that we have password policy again, but it didn't set the versions. So that's the bug. But then if we do version equals 7.x 1.0, that's cool. Cannot read project short name. Oh, okay. That's wonderful. Set project. So maybe, geez. Set initial default project. So there's still some bugs there. So I spun that out because that was actually causing issues with this URL query parameter thing. And then apparently I added some code here to fix like a different bug and shot myself in the foot even more. So yay to making your own mistakes and not knowing why. And then so we can remove these, and eventually I want to get this launcher into its own one so we can try to clean all this up more. Drupal core version selector, just linting. So set Drupal version from the first one. Launcher context. All right. Now what I need to do is run Cypress to test all the user interface stuff. Summary advanced options. Why didn't it click it? Try and add additional. Why didn't it click? So this errored out. Add additional projects. Yeah, but why didn't it? Should we run it to see if it was a fluke? So we get password policy. Oh, okay, so it was just a fluke. All right, so that's running. That makes me happy. Let's go back to our tests. Let's run. Oh no, wrong one. So I have tests that reinstall this Drupal site, and this is one of those where in the background it's doing ddev drush site install. So there's a plugin. Did I make it a plugin? No, I did not. Support commands. So I made a install Drupal command, which reads your environment for the drush install command and does a full reinstall. So I just hosed my environment on accident with this command. But that's okay because the site is set up to be for this to happen. So I guess while that runs, I'm just going to make a quick snapshot commit. But I'm just going to go through the diffs again. I mean, this file is getting cleaned up, which is making it a little bit easier to find some bugs, but this context is still a monster and a half that I want to get fixed. Using a callback here seems to have prevented a bunch of extra re-renders. Let's call it refactor. Well, this is a lot more. And advanced options. And more. Horrible commit message, but it'll do. All right, so that test ran. Launch form prefill. Yes, I just want to commit. So this is going to take a second because we got to re-download all of our data. Why did I do a 302 redirect? Oh, okay. So this is the prefill, and this, I broke the prefill. Great. So I know I need to fix that. And let's make sure that this is still working. Let's restart it. the autocomplete gets. All right, so this is testing all the core compatibility. And the advanced options isn't toggling for some reason. So that's a joy. All right, I'm going to close that. I'm going to stop the runner because that's just not. Next up will be fixing these. Trying to get this to be correct. So cannot read property short name of null on Drupal core version selector. Let's dig in. So line 43. If selected project short name is equal to Drupal. So what is the project short name value? Oh, it crashed, so I can't even inspect that. So let's go ahead and we'll do a debugger here. And to see what's happening. All right, so selected project. But why did Drupal core version even render? It shouldn't render yet. So we'll have to. So if we'll have to just say if selected project and. So this should not even. So no, that should be if there's no selected project or. That should be an or. Let re-render. So if we step over, returns null because no component should render. We get our, oh my goodness. So components, what is going on here? So launch context provider, value, selected project is null because we have the, all right. So in the launcher, but then we get back to the whole problem where it freaked out because the selected version kept changing. Let's see. I don't like this at all. So we just got to also do, I don't know. I feel like I just walked back on everything in there with the debugging, but so selected version, selected project, so it's not null. So we hit play. Yeah, it's got prettier running too. Oh, you mean the dependency? Yeah, it should warn about any of that in there. But this is just what? Why did dismiss? Oh, I broke DevTools somehow. I feel like the URL query parameter support is what just destroyed this entire app. And that's the problem. So yeah, so we have the selected project, selected version, but again, everything's just messed up because of the query parameters. So I feel like that needs to just get yanked out and not supported. But it's already in there, so now we're stuck. So I don't like the fact that that rendered 3 times. So maybe just need to go for a bigger bang approach. Where this needs to be, it's more than memo. We got one thing set up with use callback. The problem is that this is like the state for the entire form. So we got to go just do selected project needs to become an object that also contains the version. So we need like a reducer, I believe, to make that work better. React use reducer for state objects. Yeah, those people that come in half the way when we already went through memoization and use handler. Yeah. Manage complex state with use reducer and use context. All right. Take the use state hook. Explain. Yep. Use reducer to do reducer initial state. Give me some. So to use dispatch provider to do list dispatch equals use reducer, and this the value. Code. I don't want to open a code sandbox. Like these code sandbox things are neat, but it doesn't beat like actually just being able to read a GitHub thing. From to do.js. All right, so initial state. So let's do this. So we're gonna do const initial state. I have used Yeoman, but not since 5 years ago, maybe. It's 2021, maybe 2018 is the last time I used Yeoman to like scaffold a package. So we're gonna do initial state. We're gonna have this be project short name is there, title is blah, and version is empty. So we're gonna have that. We know that's part of our initial state. Is projects have a short name and a version. That is taken directly from this project info definition. So I'm gonna try to just create a new state, and I'm gonna try to just basically rewrite this whole thing right now. This whole refactoring bit is not cutting it. So we have project, we have Drupal version, we have the install profile, we have manual install, and we have additional projects, which is an empty array. And inside project info, we have the title, short name, the type, whether it's a sandbox or not, which we don't actually care about in our end, at least, the version, and then patches, which is an empty array. All right, so let's see. So to do reducer, add action, mark action, which returns there. So now we're just recreating Redux, apparently. So to do it, context. Const is to-do list and dispatch. Well, I guess, Redux under the hood did all of this anyways. So let's do this here. Maybe this will make it be a little bit easier. I don't know. So it'd be const, and we'll call it just launch data. We'll call it launcher. Why not? Call it form data. No, we'll just say launcher, and then we'll call it dispatch is what they had. So dispatch, and that equals use reducer, which we pass the to do reducer, and that was this function here. So we will just write our own anonymous function for now that receives the state and action. But actually we should spit it out so that way we reduce our things that get re-rendered. So function, launcher, reducer, state, action, and it needs to return the state. So we'll do return state. It'll be here. Yeah, I mean, like we don't need Redux, and like at least like with hooks, it's not the complete boilerplate of using the Redux library, even though it's the same thing. So we have the initial state. All right. So I'm basically going to be rebuilding the React front end now to use this new state idea. So one thing we'll need is, so we have this, where'd it go? So switch on action type. Why? No, I don't like that they actually have it mimicking Redux completely, but maybe that's okay. Because the action has a payload. Yeah. So let's do switch action.type, and default is return state. So let's have it where it says action, or we do case, and it's set main project. And so that we would have return. We would have new state equals state. Do new state. Or we would have, we could just do return state. So we'll merge in the existing state, but then project will equal action dot payload. So that should work. I think. Yeah, so set main project will move there. And I think we can start debugging part of this, or start messing with it a little bit. And then I'm going to call it, because I need to do some yard work today. All right, so set main project, and what do? They pass the, so we get the dispatch, and they pass the value to be dispatch. What? Post link. Well, where do they do this add action and whatnot? So index. Oh, input task. So dispatch, they use the context. Dispatch add action. Oh boy. So actually I have no idea what this would look like in our end. So let's just take dispatch. We're going to add it to our values and see what happens. So I'm going to close this now. Well, actually, I'm not going to. Let's see what this looks like. Components. So look at the provider, the value. Dispatch is a dispatch action. Okay, and well, I guess the value also we need to pass in the launcher value. We'll see here, because that's the one thing that confuses me, is they have this to-do list which comes from the reducer and the context, but then they don't pass that down. Oh, the task list receives the to-do list. I see. So that's where they wrap it in. Well, we need to do that differently for our side. So launcher has all the values. So All right. Eventually, that could be like our values could just be launcher itself. With that, because we have Drupal version and install profile, set manual. All right. So let's try in here. Let's do in this project selection. No, I refuse. I haven't used Redux or Sagas in 3 years. I refuse to go back to that. So this on change in project selection comes from app.js. Set main project, which is from the above. So we actually want this to be, let's stop sending set main project from here. And we'll do function set main project gets the project and version. So let's do project version, and we'll do dispatch. So it'd be type is set main project. Right. So I want to do a setting the debugger here. It's not going to quite work. So we're going to do debugger there out above the switch. The type is main project. So an app set type is main project. And it's going to be project is project with a comma. Is a spread of project, and then we're going to say version. And we'll see what this does. I'm just curious to see if this will dispatch and be the start to a better flow. I hope. So we've got the project and we got the version. We did dispatch, and inside the reducer, our action has type set main project, and we have the version. And that ran twice. And now we're in a loop. I give up. All right. I give up on that. So I'm going to pick this up next week sometime and try to just figure out how to get this thing cleaned up better, because this is not it. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you got to learn about memoization and callbacks now, because I didn't really know about those before. And hopefully I can sort out this React app to be a bit cleaner. I feel like it just needs a complete rewrite from scratch, because trying to fix it from the state has just been hasn't been as productive. So sometimes that's just what you have to do. You write the initial prototype, and refactoring the initial prototype doesn't work. Yeah, it's interesting. If you don't understand anything React, you still watch the stream. So React is fun. I try to change up what I do on this stream. So like Sundays with Simply Test Me, it does touch on React and PHP. On Wednesday, I'll be doing another stream that helps remove the jQuery dependencies from Drupal 10. So there will be some JavaScript in there, and some of this stuff is the more advanced React stuff. It's getting to parts that I've never actually had to use memoize or use callback functions. But I think now this is at a point where it does have such enormous info in it that it's pushing me to parts of React I don't know. So hopefully it showed you some things, just ways to debug things and to poke around. if you haven't done React and you are getting new to it, definitely get the, oh, it's not going to render on here. Definitely get the React DevTools extension, because that is how you can inspect state. And if you do Vue, there's the Vue DevTools. I use that. Even Alpine.js, which is like the minimal framework, they even have an inspector that lets you look at state. That's my one recommendation to anybody that's a developer that's trying to learn, is learn how to use their debugger, the step debugger. I know some people are like, well, I like to just write console.log. Yeah, that works, but learn how to drop breakpoints in your code. And like right here, should invoke, we just stopped the runtime loop inside of React. That keeps running all the time in the background. Like, don't be afraid to drop a debugger point and just see and inspect your data. Same within your components, to look at your values and like why things are running. To have introspection into the data of your application and the way it's running is the best way to solve bugs. And that transcends React, PHP. PHP use Xdebug. If it's in Golang, well, you make sure you compile it with the debugger and the debugger running. Same with Java or any compiled application. So hopefully there were some interesting tidbits here and you had a good time. I'm going to sign off and come up with a better battle plan for this React application. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.